Hello everyone, I'm Kindlin. Today we are here with special guests Malia and Denaya in the Mary Magdalene Ministries, who taught us about youth in the civil rights movement through the video, No More, the Children of Birmingham, 1963. But before we start, let's take a short break from our sponsor KMT Heating and Air Conditioning.
Retrofitting our property will be a minimal expense compared to new construction.
Retrofitting will raise property value and lead to higher resident retention.
KMT Heating and Air Conditioning will serve as our HVAC professionals contracted to provide smart thermostats, duct cleaning, and replacing any old air conditioning units on site.
My name is Sean Oliver, here with KMT Heating and Air Conditioning, and we're on a site today, Donovan Place. It's a rehab renovation apartment complex. We got about 12 apartments here that we're renovating. It's a total renovation, but we're taking care of the air conditioning, the heating and air conditioning in the spaces, and we're also dealing with the ductwork, the indoor air quality. So we're doing duct cleaning and sanitizing.
Call for your retrofit today.
919-274-7224.
After the Civil Rights Act of 1963 was passed, the 17th Street Baptist Church was bombed, and 5 girls, Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Sarah Collins, Cynthia Wesley, and Carol Robertson were all trapped under the debris. 4 of them died, but fortunately Sarah Collins survived, but was left with trauma for the rest of her life. Oppression is a state of being subject to unjust treatment or control.
In 1963, a century after the Emancipation Proclamation, the United States was still a nation divided. Segregation kept blacks and whites in separate worlds which were anything but equal.
It would take the courage and sacrifice of the young and innocent to shock a nation that believed itself the bastion of democracy into truly making America a place with liberty and justice for all.
The time had come to say, no more.
No more. No more.
In 1954, the ruling of the Supreme Court in Brown v. Board of Education declared that separate was inherently unequal and that integration ought to proceed with all deliberate speed. Not everyone agreed.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
In Birmingham, Alabama, desegregation was a dangerous business, no matter what the courts said. With more than 20 unsolved bombings between 1957 and 1963 and KKK associates in positions of power, Birmingham was a stronghold of racial oppression and intimidation. After his setback in Albany, Georgia, Martin Luther King arrived in Birmingham on April 3, 1963, for a make-or-break battle of the dying civil rights movement.
Project C got off to a disappointing start. A court injunction against parading and an 800% increase in bail costs made a trip to jail more likely to last 6 months than 6 days. Marchers realistically feared losing their jobs and their homes. Few volunteered. Fewer were arrested. On April 12th, King tried to draw people by marching himself. He and Ralph Abernathy went to jail. In King's absence, jive-talking James Bevel held the floor at the mass meetings and struck a chord with the young people who didn't have jobs or own homes. They began to volunteer in droves. Bevel started a whisper campaign for student demonstrations. When King was released on April 20th, he was highly conflicted over the use of children as marchers. Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, however, summed up the situation when he said, "We gotta use what we got."
Black parents tried to shield their children from the harsh reality of segregation, but it wasn't always possible.
March of '63, they blew up the church next to our house. My father's car was set on fire. He was also ran off a bridge one night. It was tough.
One of the worst nights of Chris McNair's life was when he had to tell his daughter the reason he couldn't buy her the sandwich she'd wanted at a store that day was that she was black. Still, they hoped. When Barbara Cross and her family moved to Birmingham in 1962, her father, Reverend John Cross, tried to get into a taxi.
And he said, "We don't carry your kind." My father told him, "Before I leave Alabama, you'll be carrying anyone who wants to catch a case."
Civil rights photographer Charles Moore remembers his father saying, "Son, you don't treat people poorly because they are a different color." Other white children were not so lucky, spoon-fed hatred and lies of black inferiority and prevented by segregation from befriending black children. Many believed what they'd been taught. White student Charles Entrican pointed out that people breathe in the prejudices of their culture without any understanding of what they're taking in. It takes something to wake them up. The children of Birmingham were about to wake up the entire nation. On May 2nd, DJ Shelley the Playboy announced, "Kids, there's gonna be a party at the park." It was a signal. Black students of all ages climbed out classroom windows and over fences.
They called it D-Day for the demonstration day at 12 o'clock noon. I know we were all leaving school.
Some children walked as much as 18 miles to congregate at the 16th Street Baptist Church, site of mass meetings and nonviolent training for the movement. They would face the police they'd been taught to fear. At 1 p.m., James Bevel began sending them out in groups of 50 towards City Hall.
We was the first group out of the church. We got about 4 or 5 blocks and we were stopped by the police. Bull Connor came up and they put those so-and-sos in the car. And when they stopped us, the fear.
Bull Connor and the police were waiting and herded the children into paddy wagons and off to jail. After an hour, they had to commandeer school buses. 973 children were arrested. On their best day, the adult demonstrators had managed 32.
Went to jail, stayed 9 days. My experience in jail was...
Why do you think children were tired of oppression?
Well, even though the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, black people still had to face segregation for another 100 years. Malia, why do you think people were bombing people of color in Birmingham?
People were bombing colored people just because they didn't want segregation to end. Why is it important for James Bevel to spread the word in Birmingham?
James was a part of the community. James was a part of the community. He had a connection that Dr. King did not have what James had. Why were young people devoting their time to help the movement rather than adults, Kendallin?
Well, because adults had certain things they had to do and that the government could threaten to take away. But kids and students, well, maybe college students, but kids like from 6th grade to 10th grade didn't have those priorities that they have to maintain. So they could have went to the protest and not have anything to lose. Stay tuned for more about how youth influenced the civil rights movement. Now here is a word from our sponsor, Network Commerce Association.
And marketing, in research, development, and manufacturing, and in business functions such as finance, human resources, procurement, and supply chain while leveraging technology. Or maybe you and your business need financial services. We can analyze your financials, grow your business through alliances, co-ops, mergers, or acquisitions, and we can plan your exit strategies by selling, liquidating, or implementing options such as worker cooperatives. Or maybe you just have insurance needs, life, health, disability, property and casualty, bond services, risk management services, and annuities. Network Commerce Association. Transform vision to equity.
We have been discussing youth engagement in the civil rights movement. We have the video, No More, the Children of Birmingham, 1963.
Cells meant for 50 now held as many as 300 children. Officers beat bodies back from the door with a chain in order to open it far enough to admit more prisoners. While D-Day had yielded many arrests, the events of the day were fairly non-violent. That would not be true of Double D-Day. Once again, students came by the thousands. This time, policemen were waiting with German shepherds and fire hoses. For an hour, students were quietly arrested. But Connor was running out of jail cells. He needed to scare them into stopping. Firemen doubled the water pressure to 100 pounds per square inch. Bull Connor gave the word to let him have it. The water literally blew children off their feet and swept them down the sidewalks. Witnessing this, black millionaire A.G. Gaston interrupted his phone conversation saying, "I can't talk. My people are out there fighting for their lives and my freedom. I have to help them."
Carolyn Mall and two other students took shelter against the wall of a nearby building. The water tore her sweater and ripped hair from her scalp. Charles Moore was there to capture the events on film. The water had scattered the students, but as the noise died down, a small group of students still standing could be heard singing, "Freedom." The students regrouped. Police dogs were sent to the hospital. 1,920 rounds and locked in the stock pens. Most would stay for 1 to 2 weeks. Wherever they were imprisoned, the songs of the movement rang out and gave them courage.
The effects of the Children's March came quickly, beginning on Miracle Sunday, when parents and children marched together. In spite of Connor's order, the firemen refused to attack. More than 20,000 students had skipped school to go to jail. By May 10th, the businesses of Birmingham had had enough and agreed to desegregate. As children returned to school, however, they were informed that they had been expelled. The school board's decision was appealed all the way to the district court in Atlanta before it was overturned and the students were readmitted.
On May 17th, Life magazine published an 11-page spread of Charles Moore's photos of the Children's March. More than half the country read it. In 186 cities across the country, people marched in support of the youth of Birmingham. In the White House, the photos sickened President Kennedy, who, bolstered by the courage of the children, at last called for change.
The events in Birmingham and elsewhere have so increased the cry for equality that I shall ask the Congress of the United States to act to the proposition that race has no place in American life or law.
On July 23rd, Birmingham repealed its segregation ordinances, and in August, the March on Washington showed the movement was national. That fall, the schools of Birmingham were integrated. But after all these successes, the children would be asked to make one more sacrifice. On the morning of September 15th, 1963, just as the Sunday school classes were ending and youth were preparing to usher on this special Youth Sunday, dynamite ripped through the 16th Street Church.
I had planned to go to the bathroom with my friend, and my teacher stopped me and gave me an assignment. I saw Annie, said, "See you in a little while." 15 minutes after I heard the blast, it was a horrible noise. Ground was shaking under us. Something hit me in my head, and I was screaming. And I heard all the kids screaming. Everybody running outside, crying and looking for their loved ones.
5 girls in the basement women's restroom were buried under 30-inch thick pieces of the wall. 4 of them died.
My dad saw a gaping hole in the basement where the bricks were blown away. And so when they started digging, and after about 2 or 3 feet, they found the girls' bodies blown together.
The nation was appalled. The need for change was painfully clear. There could be no more Birminghams. The tide of support for civil rights swelled, flowing into Washington and pushing the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed segregation. The next year, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 resecured rights that had been part of law but not part of life for a century.
I like to say to my friends, through that bloodshed, that was a down payment of freedom. That was a down payment on history.
The courage and sacrifice of the children finally broke the back of the rule of fear and hatred.
Their innocent hope and bravery revived a dying civil rights movement and changed the future of their world.
They would be afraid no more.
Now that we're back, Malia, can you please tell me how radio helped the civil rights movement and spread the word?
The radio played a part in the movement because it was easy to transport messages to others. Denia, 1964 civil rights movement outlawed segregation. How do you think people of Birmingham felt?
I think the people of Birmingham felt very, like, the white people on one hand didn't want the black people in their community, not in their schools, and the black people just wanted an education, better books, but overall, they didn't even got what they want because they all got expelled. Kendallin, what's the impact do you think that the school walkout had on children?
Well, like you said, they all got expelled for wanting equal rights to other students, and they wanted the same education. And while they were walking out, 9,000, a majority of them went to jail, and they were beaten with chains so they can make more room in the car. Oh. Yeah. It's not my turn. What is it?
D-Day was the first day of the Children of Birmingham to gather to march against the school segregation in 1963. Whisper campaign. Denia, what was the risk of marching on D-Day worth it?
Yes, it was worth it, because without these children willing to march, which showed shame on the United States, we would not be here today. How do you think the killing of Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Cynthia Wesley, and Carol Robinson affect on America? Kendallin.
It brought shame to America because multiple lives were lost for no reason at all, and it was just shameful. Before we move on, let's take a short break from our sponsors, KMT Heating and Air Conditioning.
To keep your home comfortable year-round, you need to schedule routine maintenance. Regular inspection will allow a technician to discover potential problems. Problems created by a dirty system include water leaks, freezing up or icing, restricted airflow. Air conditioning maintenance is essential to the long-lasting life of your system. Call KMT today, 919-274-7224.
Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Kimball. Can you tell us what can you tell us about the civil rights era?
It was a very turbulent time. It was part of my childhood, and even though I was in New York at the time, we saw a lot of things on the 6 o'clock news, and it impacted me from the standpoint that I could not understand the whole process of why one peoples would oppress another. That was never explained to me. I was kind of raised in a different thought process. not lowering myself to a racist point of view, because I was taught I was better than that. But at the same time, it became important for me to realize and grow up to understand that racism was real. Next question.
Let's read it. It's 3 questions.
Can you compare the contrast of the civil rights era to today?
Absolutely. If I compare the two, and if we go back to the Birmingham or Birmingham historical point, instead of water hoses and dogs, they're using tear gas and shields and batons. We're reliving the situation that happened at that time from a standpoint of there's still a lot of fear in society of people wanting to be treated equally and justly here in the United States.
How does the work you do today relate to the civil rights movement?
One of the things that I focus on is how do we move those of us who are considered the least of us forward through the educational process of being able to leapfrog ahead through technology. So no longer do we have to go and pull telephone string, telephone wire in order to communicate. We can use cell phones and put up cell towers. Well, in the same instance, I don't have to teach how to build a regular landline telephone. All I need to do is teach how the cell phone works and how to program it and how to write apps for it, and therefore give skills that translate to work, economy changes, money comes in the household, and entrepreneurs and innovators are born.
Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Kimball. Is there anything else you would like to say to the camera?
I am just enjoying the fact that you young men and women are stepping up and spreading your wings in the area of media, that you will be our future. And the only thing that I admonish you and your viewers to do is to go back and review our past so that we don't repeat the past in the future. Okay? Thank you so very much.
Up next, we have a word from our sponsor, Network Commerce Association.
Would you like to increase your performance in distribution and sales and marketing, in research, development, and manufacturing, and in business functions such as finance, human resources, procurement, and supply chain while leveraging technology? Or maybe you and your business need financial services. We can analyze your financials, grow your business through alliances, co-ops, mergers, or acquisitions, and we can plan your exit strategies by selling, liquidating, or implementing options such as worker cooperatives. Or maybe you just have insurance needs, life, health, disability, property and casualty, bond services, risk management services, and annuities. Network Commerce Association. Transform vision to equity.
Welcome back. Now we're going to talk to Ms. Geraldine with the Mary Magdalene Ministries.
Ms. Geraldine, why did you become a voice for children and who don't have one?
I became a voice for children who don't have one because that's just it, because they don't have one, and somebody has to speak. When it comes to poor children, black children, brown children, too often we don't have folks who will speak up on their behalf. And because there was an absence of a voice, I decided that I would be that voice. And also, I was affected I had a son who was in public school, and of course, being without a father, he looked to his coaches for their support. And he was a kid who was in the sixth grade, scored at the ninth grade level in college. And they denied him really access to what he could have been by using him as a football pawn, really. And then when they were finished with him, they broke him. They broke his spirit. They really broke his spirit by denying him to be able to be on the be at the football banquet. They advocated for children. That pushed me further.
Why is it important that children learn about their history and origins from where they came from?
Marcus Garvey said that people without a knowledge of their history and their culture is a people without, is like a tree without a root. And the same applies. When people don't have a knowledge of their history and their root, they're just like a tree. And if a tree doesn't have a root, it does what? It dies. It doesn't function. So that's why it's important that we can thrive and that we can grow and that we can spread our wings and be powerful like that tree.
Do you like what you do? And what are some challenges you face?
I love what I do. But some of the challenges that I have are the same challenges that we had back in the early 60s. Not a lot of people get involved and speak up for children who are in public school for the same reasons. That one, they're afraid that they might lose their jobs. They're afraid that they might, even today, that they might be hurt, they might be killed, they might become victimized. And so those parents who have to work 2 and 3 jobs, it's frustrating when you can't get them to speak up on behalf of their children, but I understand that a lot of it is because they don't have the wherewithal to do so. They don't have the time because they're trying to provide for their families. So, those are a few of the challenges, but I look over the challenges, because I know the needs. So I will continue to be a voice for our children.
Thanks for tuning in this week. Be sure to like and subscribe to TooMuchTV on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Share this with your friends and family too. And make sure to tune in next week too. We want to thank our special guests, Mrs. Geraldine Ashami, founder of Mary Magdalene Ministries. Look for Mrs. Geraldine on Facebook and to become a youth advocate at Geraldine Ashami. Or activist Geraldine Shamey. We also want to thank Mrs. Tangi Kimball, founder of First Labs Academy. Thank you and have a good evening.